start recording now. Cool. So I'll just upload it to YouTube and I'll send you a link after.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
No worries. So generally, as I was saying, like the process is always going to be different. And the key is like articulating like what you did and why you did it. So do you want to work on kind of articulating process specifically for whiteboarding challenges or kind of for portfolio walkthroughs in general?
For this one, whiteboarding, and then I know I am going to schedule another session with you for like portfolio presentation. But definitely, I forgot to mention this manager is going to be focusing on my interaction design
Okay, great.
as well, like my knowledge on interaction design.
Okay, awesome. I actually have
Mhm.
like a pretty detailed article on interaction design and a framework that I can show you as well. So, great. Let's kind of like start very high level. So generally with whiteboarding challenges, there's two types.
Mhm.
One is more abstract and one's more functional. The abstract one is purely just looking at your problem solving approach. And there is no right answer with that kind of approach. It's more just like to see how you problem solve. And the other one that's functional is usually like a specific like app or digital kind of product experience. Either they give you a problem and they want you to like whiteboard out like how you would approach a actual design solution, or maybe it's like introducing a feature or solving a problem or capitalizing on an opportunity with a app that already exists.
Okay.
Do you know which type of whiteboarding challenge that you want to focus on or what Microsoft is going to ask you?
Um, I think honestly, I have no idea exactly what direction. Just um,
We can
I
try and
th-
cover both at a high level if you want.
okay.
Um, cool. And then just to add a couple more pieces of context for whiteboarding challenges in general, I'll give you some like high level tips. So don't treat it as a test. One of the things that they're really looking at is how receptive you are to feedback. Sometimes I'll even disagree with you intentionally, even if you're right, just to see how you take it. Um, they're also looking at how we collaborate. So don't see them as like a proctor in an exam. Treat them as a teammate and try and approach the problem together. They're probably intentionally going to be a not super helpful teammate, but they just want to see how you can engage and work with them. So
Okay.
as I'm working through the problem, I'm always like kind of articulating all my thoughts out loud, and I ask for feedback very liberally. Like, I think we should do this because of this rationale. What do you think? So try and involve them as much as you can. And then generally, as you approach a problem, you want to start at more like macro levels. So with product thinking, context gathering, which in the case of whiteboarding is just defining your assumptions, and then information architecture, and then visual design, and then like branding and marketing and all that stuff. And you can also talk about the constraints as well. Like you only have like an hour or 30 minutes to do the challenge. You can talk about like given the constraints of this time, this is what I would do. If I had more time, I would do these things because of whatever reasons. And then another piece to kind of understand is when they present a design challenge to you, they intentionally do not give you enough information because that's how they mimic the process in real life, because when you're designing, you're never going to have complete information. You have
Yeah.
to be really good at understanding, what can we assume and what assumptions should we validate. So generally what I would recommend is when they give you the information, like write it down, like these are the info, and then you want to generally ask clarifying questions on the scope and the constraint. You either ask them or you state your assumption and ask them if they would agree. So if it's okay with you, do you want to start with the abstract version of the whiteboarding challenge first?
Yeah, let's go.
So one of my favorite ones that I always ask is design a alarm clock that only has one button, and it has to be able to set the alarm and snooze, um, and obviously like view the time, and that's all
Okay.
the information I give you. So if you start drawing an alarm clock, you just automatically fail. You need to kind of like stop and ask like, what are the parameters here? So I obviously intentionally did not give you enough information. Um, Maybe we can actually do this interactively on Figma. Would that be better?
Yeah, that would be great. I actually remember in one of the your weekly group meetings, you actually did talk about this,
Yes.
the alarm clock. So I'm trying not to
I can
forget
do a
what.
different one if you want.
Um, yes, because all I can think about is hearing you saying, digital versus analog, and then
Yep.
asking like, and I'm just like, okay, my
Okay.
mind is going into that video.
Okay, let's do a different one. I have a couple that I'm familiar with.
And this is my first ever whiteboard design.
Nice. Hold on. I'm trying. Okay, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
All right. Do you mind giving me your email again?
It's Nayeri
Hmm.
dot Jacobo. I believe that's the one I have it under with
Uh,
Figma.
at gmail.com.
Yes, I
Cool.
believe so. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Let me know once you're in. The challenge that I want to give you now is design, and this is kind of combining both, so maybe this might work better
Mm-hmm.
for a time traveling app.
Okay.
Um, and then required features is choose a um, time period to go back to. Um, and then the kind of constraint is uh, time traveling users um, are in cannot interact with the environment. Just kind of pretend like they're in a floating bubble of some sort.
Okay.
Um, okay, so this is a constraint here. This is the required feature. They need to be able to choose a time period to go back in, and then they need some sort of feature to end the experience. And then they cannot interact with the environment at all. Um, and that's basically it. So let's design an interface. So this is all
Okay.
the information I'm going to give you. And let's say you captured everything I said perfectly and wrote it down. Um, so step one is to ask me questions to find out the constraints of this problem, the scope of this
Mm-hmm.
problem, and also you want to state your assumptions as well. Because right now
Okay.
it's super open-ended, and like if you were to design this without any of those things, it would take like forever. So the first one is assumptions, constraints, and oops, and scope. Cool. All right, walk me through this.
So, ooh, this okay. So you said design interface for time traveling app. So the first thing I just want to like figure out is exactly like what is the problem that we're gonna like try to solve for. Um, so my question would be like, would I turn the constraint into a problem?
You can assume the problem and ask the interviewer to confirm or deny. So what do you think
Okay.
this would solve?
So I'm making the assumption that um people that are time traveling um are not able to just to interact with the environment that they're having. Um, but before making that assumption, what would you mean by like how why they cannot how they're not able to interact with the environment?
Well, this is actually a constraint
Oh.
that I'm giving you.
Oh, okay.
So I'm asking to assume like why somebody would even want to travel in the first place. So you can say something like entertainment, which is kind of the prompt
Mm.
that I was going to define. Like people are bored. Like this is the future. They have a lot of technology. Movies and TV shows don't cut it. Or maybe this is like a better way to view history. Um, Maybe that's like the prompt.
Okay. Okay. So,
So
that makes sense now.
no worries. Sorry if I wasn't clear. So that's entertainment, and then maybe you can talk about who is this for? Who do you think would be interested in being entertained by traveling back in time?
I think most this sounds very out of people comfort zones. I think more in the younger generations from people that are maybe teenagers to early 20, like early 20 to 30 year olds. Um Spontaneous
Okay,
people.
spontaneous. So you don't really have to give like a age, but maybe one
Mhm.
thing that you want to clarify is like, is this very expensive? You know, is this going to be like a
Mm,
SpaceX thing, right? Will younger people be able to afford a time traveling experience?
okay.
Maybe it's for people that are more interested in history. Because think about this is like year, maybe I should say this is like the year like I don't know 2200 or something, like very far in the future.
Yes. No, 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 this is fine. I'm also need to start practicing just like thinking more like this, and
Yeah,
I
so
that's why I wanted to do this.
uh, so at the business level, right? Like, why does this app even exist, right?
Mhm.
Like, I didn't give you enough information intentionally. I gave you the two required features, what the app is, and the constraint. You need to make assumptions about what the prompt is, who it's for, how accessible it is, maybe. Um, so we'll keep that all in mind as we kind of like design the interface. So
Okay. And then I had just one question because just even from like last week's video, you said like always think about like the market first before, is
yeah,
that something?
yes. You want to do it very loosely here because the focus, like if you were maybe doing an interview with a product manager or something, and maybe it wasn't a whiteboard challenge, or maybe the whiteboard wasn't the focus, and you can talk about
Mhm.
product thinking for the entire duration. If
Okay.
you're being interviewed by a designer, you want to demonstrate the three core skills: interaction, visual, and product thinking. It might even be beneficial to say something like, hey, like, as we approach this prompt together, I'm going to spend 15 minutes defining the prompt, the context, 5 minutes mapping out the information architecture that I think would make sense, 10 minutes evaluating interaction, and then 10 minutes on visual. And then,
Yeah.
that's like the hard stuff. The soft stuff, as I mentioned, is, communication, collaboration, and receptiveness to feedback.
Okay. No, this is really good points. Yeah, it's going to be the hiring manager doing this with me.
Okay. So you can talk about the market, but I wouldn't dwell too much on it, You want to
Okay.
make sure that like it would just like suck if like, let's just imagine like product thinking, interaction, and visual, like you get a score out of five. If you spend too much time, you might get perfect scores in the first two and then get like zero on the last one. So you do need
Yeah.
to kind of manage your time. You can even ask like, hey, interviewer, do you mind giving me a reminder if you think I'm spending too long on one of these areas? Because this is what I want to tackle. So it's perfectly okay to set that expectation and tell them like
Mhm.
plan to tackle it and how you plan to manage your time. Because I've
Oh,
also seen whiteboarding challenge interviews where, you know, that one person just spent like, 45 minutes out of the hour purely on like one aspect. And I'm like trying to like urge them to demonstrate some signal and skills in the other areas and didn't quite get there.
mhm.
So I always appreciate people that come into this with a plan.
Okay. Thank you. Um,
So I'm gonna add another constraint for you. I'm sorry, this is gonna be very expensive. So let's factor that into if I introduce this new constraint, how does that affect who this is for?
so then that will make the who are we designing, who are we actually creating this product for people that are
Like,
um
more well,
they they're wealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
disposable income. You could say interested in history.
mhm. And then yeah, adventurous. So yes, I will definitely make that more specific. And then that's all I can think about right now.
What about scope, right? Like designing interface a time travel for a time traveling app, right? What does that include? Are you booking? Are you browsing? Are you getting info? Like what is the app going to do, right? Because like the full time traveling experience might be spread out across many different sub experiences.
Mm-hmm.
For the goals and the features that we discussed here, like what feature set would make sense to be scoped into a single product?
Um, Wait, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
No worries. So like the entire time traveling experience can be spanned across like many different experiences. Like there might be like a website for like the booking. There might be like
Mm-hmm.
an audio book, like an audio guide experience inside the app. You might browse it on some other platform. It could be like spread out across many interfaces or
Yes.
combined into one. For the scope of this whiteboarding challenge, like what would you like to focus on? What do you think is most critical based off like what we've defined so far?
For like the what I thought about really like holistically when you were saying all of that and just thinking about like the technology that's out there, my mind did wonder, and this is inexpensive. Making sure this is, ugh, it's like an expensive constraint, and then what we have is just like this immersive experience, maybe like the VR AR world when
Mhm.
it to that's where my head went really quickly. Um, and why would it be appropriate? I think the
So
reason why. Mhm.
like the entire user journey here, right? Like starting
Mhm.
from like even hearing of this service to somehow registering, paying, choosing an experience. I'm imagining it to be like booking it like a flight almost, or maybe it's
Yeah.
something that like you just tap it and you go directly into the experience and you can do it ad hoc. Like we haven't defined that constraint yet, so I don't know.
Mhm.
um, like out of the entire user journey, it's probably not feasible for you to whiteboard the whole thing. So what area would you focus on?
Oh, okay. Um, I will focus on just booking. I will focus on first the excitement of booking where you want to travel to.
Okay. So that covers this first feature. But then one of the other features that we wanted
Yes,
to scope in
and
was to like stop the experience. How would that look?
stop when we want to stop the experience.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I feel like you can ask more questions, right? Like I just said time travel and you might have a lot of assumptions on how that's gonna work. But
yeah.
clarify or kind of like make it obvious because right now we have two different interpretations of what time travel means. I feel like that would be one of the things to kind of like state as an assumption. So
Mhm.
maybe you can add another section here to explain how it works. So you can either state your assumption or ask me a question.
So, actually, what is your interpretation of time traveling?
Um,
Yeah.
so like if I was an interviewer, I'd flip it on you. I'd be like, what do you think would be the best experience given no technology constraints? It's a year 2020. Sorry, 2200.
2200. Okay. Right now, how I see time traveling, also from my background and just thinking of Back to the Future. Just having a gadget, a tool that just brings you into that world.
Can you
But then,
elaborate on what type of gadget?
um, it would definitely not be a car, but it will be some. I'm thinking something just compact. Um, just right, nothing too bulky, something that it can be accessible, like put it in your bag, in your or in your jeans, just in case for those spontaneous um people that one day just like
What if they lose that gadget? Are they trapped?
we're gonna put there that
What
is
if
actually
it
really
was like a VR helmet that's like literally attached to their head, and when they take it off, they're automatically transported back to present time? That seems like a safer experience to me. What do you think?
um yeah, it it would be a safe experience. Just like yeah, I
Okay, so you see how like I called out like an edge case with like,
mhm.
your idea of a gadget or something that you just put in your bag. It's like, what if you lose it? Does that mean you're trapped? So then I proposed a alternative form for that gadget that kind of had a failsafe for that edge case that could potentially be critical.
Yes.
The headset is taken off or damaged, the user automatically and safely gets transported back to present time. Okay, so that's how it works. How do we define how to, like, we need to define like the assumption of like how they choose a time and what are the constraints related to that?
The constraints on how they choose the time, like the time frame they like the place they want to travel to.
Yeah, like how do they, like they have to choose a time, but also have to choose like a location, right, for that time. How do you
Hmm.
ensure that um, they don't end up going to a really boring period in time? Like, you can there's always something happening, something interesting happening, regardless of what time it is. But that
Yeah.
interesting thing might not be like in the location that they choose, right? So if you let them choose like, hey, like middle of the Pacific Ocean in 1800, and they transport there and they're just like standing on top of a still body of water, but they paid a lot of money for that transportation. That's really bad experience.
So for that, for those case scenarios, I think even before having, I would think about first like the year they want to join, like what year they want to go into, and then kind of highlight some like, oh, this is the year of, let's say, World War I, or this is the year of like tech. So like kind of like fun facts that made that year what it was, and then once they select the year, kind of narrow it down a little bit. Okay, maybe what season do you want to be in a warmer climate, colder climate? So we're already preparing them for okay, what environment they're going to be in. Then also to this thinking about this spontaneous, like, okay, learn from the person, like, do they want a more subtle environment, like scenario, or like high intensity? Um, so we're preparing them for what they're going to get themselves into. And they also have the choice of to customize that experience for themselves.
What do you mean by customize that experience?
Where choosing, like, again, choosing what year, what day, what season. um
Why are
and
you
then
using those parameters specifically? Do you think your target audience will actually know exactly what they want?
I think just to um they won't know what they want, but I from just like some there's many people that do have a preference in like weather,
Okay,
just like if it's
I think weather's a good one, but then you're also making an assumption that they can actually feel the weather. I did talk about how they'd be in this like kind of bubble, but you didn't ask
true.
me any clarifying questions on. I said they can't interact with the environment because they're in a time traveling bubble to prevent, let's say, space time paradox. So you didn't ask me It's like temperature
Oh,
controlled, right? Like those are constraints that I would have wanted you to tease out before
okay.
we kind of dived into the solution. And yeah, like right now, I just gave you a constraint. I gave you a constraint and then I gave you an extra constraint, but you didn't ask any clarifying questions on additional constraints that you would need to make the best decisions for some of your other assumptions.
Okay.
So I'm actually trying to like scope it down so it's easier for you because right now the scope is still massive for this problem. So
Mm-hmm.
you could ask some questions or state assumptions to narrow the scope into something reasonable. So let's say they're in a climate controlled time bubble and nothing can hurt or injure them. They can only observe. Okay, so I'm giving you more constraints now.
Mm-hmm.
But try and like think about these things and ask them proactively. Um, like your interviewer is gonna give you like a lot of hints, but like generally the more hints they have to give you, the I don't want to say the lower your score is, but like
Okay.
you know what I mean, right?
Yeah. So like just being more, just kind of like that still have those curious mindset when for each
Yeah, every time you
prompt.
make a suggestion or you kind of have like a decision that you make in this whiteboarding challenge, think about in order to create that optimal experience for my end user, what information do I need to know?
Mm, okay, that's good. Definitely need to practice. I'm like, okay, I'm so happy I've booked this session.
There's also another really big interaction cost that you introduced in how to select and book. I don't know if you've noticed.
um,
So
say
your
that
your entry point here is to select a year, right? It's
again.
2200. How many years are there?
An infinite amount.
A lot of years, right? Are people gonna know like off the top of their head when a interesting event happened? I'm sure there's a event that happened every year, but for
Mm-hmm.
somebody that doesn't have a particular thing in mind, are they gonna have to manually click through every year to see what event took place that year before deciding? Would it be better if we provided categories like, hey, here's a category for wars, and then you get all the wars and the dates and the location. Here's a category for inventions. Here's a category for milestones. Here's a category for music. Like that seems like a much better entry point for me because then you can just people who are interested in a category, they click it and they see all the years and locations, and then you can
Mm-hmm.
have additional factors underneath each of those. So that's my suggestion. What do you think? Is there a better way to do that?
I I like that idea. And the reason why is just um yeah, you stated no one, I mean, unless you really love history, you won't know this information.
Mhm.
So that is actually a really good
So
starting point.
let's let's say they click on music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we can show like the title of the thing, the exact date, and then the location. What other information do you think they'd be interested in when making a decision on which event they want to go through? And keep in mind, it's very expensive, but you also didn't ask me how the payment system works, right? Is a subscription, meaning they can like view unlimited or travel unlimited times, or are they paying
Mm-hmm.
per event or per travel? Because that would also inform how you design the experience, right? Like
Yeah.
if it's subscription, then it can be very liberal. They can just like keep jumping back until they find something they're interesting, kind of like flipping through TV channels. But if it's more like flight, could you imagine paying $1,000 to fly to a country that you're like, oh, I actually don't like it here? That's a really bad experience, right?
Yes. Um,
So let's say for the constraints, it's like pay per travel. So think of it as like similar to flights. So what does that tell you in terms of how to select and book? What do you really want to prevent?
Um, hold on. What I want to prevent from if it's a pay per travel experience.
Mhm.
Um, what you mentioned earlier is just like we want to make sure mm, they I want to say just kind of make sure they want like they're gonna enjoy it. No, they have
Yeah.
a slight idea that they're gonna enjoy it before just purchasing it. Um,
Right. They want to make sure they enjoy their time travel selection, right? So
mhm.
when we do kind of go into like how it works, we've defined that, it's some sort of VR thing they put on their head. Um, and then there's a fail safe. There's no way they can get injured, so that's not a problem for us. But it's very expensive to do a single time travel. And we settled on the fact that, when they go through that selection experience, they can browse by category. Maybe they can also search too, which is probably going to be useful. And then when they go through the search results or the category results, they'll see the title, the exact date and year, and then the location that they're going to transport to. What other information would be valuable to show them so that we ensure that they're only choosing things that have a high chance of being relevant and interesting for them?
Yeah. Um, I want to say something. I want to say time because
Like time of day?
the like the time frame of the experience. Um,
I think
going back.
you're touching on a very, very relevant constraint that you haven't asked me about or defined.
Um, okay, let me see if I can discover like backtrack that. Um,
Time frame.
yes, I didn't ask for the time frame.
Yeah, like, do they stay in the past forever? Is it in 10-minute intervals, 1 hour intervals?
Hmm.
Is it like pay per minute? Like, what's the constraint there?
And then I have to make that decision. That
You have to make the
kind of.
decision, yes.
Uh,
Or you can ask them. You can make an assumption and be like, is this constraint reasonable? Sometimes they might tweak your constraint to make it easier or harder for you depending on your level.
okay. Um, so I want to say a time frame for this experience will be 2 hours. What do you think about that?
So it's like watching a movie. I think that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then I'm stuck. I'm stuck.
Okay. So we'll have the time frame here, and this is 2 hours by default. Okay. So let's say paper travel. Let's just say it costs 200 USD per 2 hour time travel duration. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
like you can even start getting into the visual design here and talking about information architecture and content hierarchy.
Okay.
Let's just design a card, okay? So um, I'm just gonna do an iPhone for now. And let's just say browse time travel. Let's call them hotspots, okay? This is,
Mm-hmm.
I'm intentionally keeping this like very, very lo-fi. And then let's just say we got all. Um, just gonna give it like a quick style. Um, okay, so all wars, um, inventions. I'm just classifying the different. I'm just mapping what we have exactly here.
Yes.
Um, music, and then art, um, then historical milestones. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also discussed the idea of having search. So I'm going to do a search bar. See, I'm just doing this super rough right now, just to help you visualize this. And this is something that you would whiteboard as well. And then let's say they selected wars. And then we wanted to find like a search result, right? So right now, let's just say World War II. My history is really bad. I think it was like 1960 or something, and say Berlin. Okay. And
Yeah.
then we'll have the duration of 2 hours, and then we'll have the cost of $200, and then we'll have a button that says time travel. Okay, and then this is a card. Um, is this enough information for someone to pay $200?
No,
What?
there there's it's still very vague in terms of um okay, what about World War II in Berlin? I think maybe like having a very high level summary of what makes this time period exciting, um, to
So
kind of set that tone.
what would that look like? What
Um,
are different ways to do that? Like you could do a description, you can do tags, you can do like a bullet list. What makes the most sense here? Or can you think of a other solution?
it will also go, there can be different from bullet points to a little summary, even if it's just like having a 30-second video. Um, but then also that goes back to the constraint of the technology that we're going to be using.
I think
Um,
video is
would that be?
okay. So
Mhm.
video. I'm just gonna. This is a really crappy wireframe.
No.
Okay, so this is a video. Okay, so this what is this like a 30-second preview or something?
Yeah, a 30-second. It's like a teaser trailer.
Yeah, I think
um,
I just like let's just say it's like 3 minutes.
yes,
Okay.
and
Think
oh, but also
analogies
being
as well, right? Like right now, time travel obviously doesn't exist, but what real world experiences can you use as reference points for this kind of whiteboarding challenge, right? You can think of tour groups, right?
mhm,
About flights. You can think about Airbnb experiences. Um,
yeah.
they're all kind of similar, right? Even books, right? Like how do they sell their tickets or like appeal to customers? Like what is their approach,
There's reviews, like ratings,
right?
what other people are talking about in regards to that.
Um,
Um,
cool. So
and then
reviews.
also going even back to bringing back my background in accessibility is not to be too dependable. If there's a video, making sure I know I'm going into depth, like it's being transcribed, but that's something that I'm just constantly aware of. Um, and then I started thinking about what happened if there is like the error states, like what happened if there's just the bandwidth right now is not working and they can't view the video, how else can they see the experience?
Going, I think those are great considerations, but you're diving a little bit too much into the micro problem without
Okay.
applying the macro problem yet. So
Okay.
at this point, right, like I only did this to help kind of like illustrate and help you brainstorm, but we actually haven't really moved past the first,
Mm-hmm.
which means that we haven't really
Yeah.
fully fleshed out like the scope, constraints, and assumptions yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll add the stuff that you recommended here. So like the rating, the reviews, the description, and then the trailer.
So what I think from like right now, trying like like even prepare for this is like thinking about should I have like a very high level framework of how I should approach these design problems.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm actually trying to give you the framework right now, right? So like they'll usually start by giving a really open-ended problem. They'll tell you the minimum requirement. They might give you a few constraints. And then you need to basically either state your assumptions or ask questions or work together to define the full set of assumptions, a full set of constraints, and also the scope. And then once you do, maybe I'll try and like write this down a little bit more. So this is step one. Um, step one.
mhm.
Step two, so is like once you have the scope, you need to do the information architecture. And then after the information architecture, you want to do the interaction design.
Oh, okay.
Um, and then after the interaction design, you want to do visual design slash content hierarchy.
Mhm.
And then step five, this is what I just call like the secret sauce, which is different for everyone. It's basically this is where you demonstrate like your own unique skills and like kind of extra special considerations that the average designer wouldn't do. So for you,
Yeah.
like accessibility, right? So like only when you get to step five do you define like, oh, like let's consider how this would work without internet, how this would work for people of different languages, how this would work. That's actually huge, right? Like let's say they speak English, they go to like World War II in Berlin, they're probably not speaking English. How would that experience work, right? That would be a great consideration. So I would do it in that order. Like if you jump to step five without kind of doing step two, three, and four, then you're not going to get full marks here.
Yeah. No, yeah, I appreciate this. And then also how no, this is very helpful. Um I'm trying to think like how I can max because like if I have 30 minutes to do design problems,
Mhm.
I like your advice on asking them to tell me if I'm spending too much time so then I can move on. Um,
Like the reason why I didn't tell you to move on is like I feel like if you like ideally you should spend around 10 minutes on this first step.
mhm,
Add a label here, but this is like defining scoping plus strengths plus scope stating assumptions.
mhm.
Like if you don't do step one properly, then like you're
It
basically
throws off.
setting yourself for failure for every other step, which is why like I feel like if you get this down, it's very very hard to mess up the subsequent steps.
Yeah.
Because like if you just went straight to information architecture and I didn't help you at all and you were just like here, then I think you would end up with something that's like scoped way too wide and you wouldn't really be able to tackle it.
Yeah. No, yeah, thank you. And then now I have a exactly like where I need to start practicing a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um,
Why don't I give you the rest of this stuff and we can move forward just in the interest of time? Would that
yes.
be cool? All right. So scope is basically like what you want to include. So, you can talk about the VR headset, how it works, like UI wise in VR space. You want to talk about browse, search, the for travel hotspots, time traveling hotspots. You want to do like the consideration step slash the detail page of the hotspot. And then you want to confirm set time travel or time travel,
Mm-hmm.
and then you want to end time travel. Um, and then you can even talk about out of scope stuff too, right? Just to show like, oh, like these are other things that I normally would want to design for the end set experience, but for the purposes of this, I'm not going to do it. So you can do like the payment checkout flow, the unboxing experience, the history log thing, where you see your past experiences, any sort of
Yeah.
features, fail safes, any edge cases that you think we might not need. Oh, you also need some sort of how to sync the two, or I guess that's technically out of scope here. Um, I just ended up designing a smartphone app. I don't know if we're gonna end up doing it because we need to find that constraint, but like sync between headset and smartphone. So this is an example of what you're not designing. You can even ask the interviewer, this is what I think we should focus on for this whiteboarding challenge. This is stuff that I would normally want to think about too, but we probably won't have time. So I'm gonna scope this out. Is there anything on this list that you think we should discuss regardless? So if you do this, they're gonna be really impressed, by the way. Like this is like yeah, gonna help you a lot. So there's all this. There's more constraints that we could have defined, but I won't go into them for now. I'll also say this is a very, very hard and challenging problem. The alarm clock one is way easier. So information architecture is, do you know what that is?
It's kind of like how I just view it is just like a web of navigation.
Yeah.
Just like
So how to do this is like, this is really closely related to the scope. So you would basically break down every aspect of the scope into individual pieces and talk about how they're connected. Um,
mhm.
so you would have, I'm trying to think about my Oculus setup experience, but I don't know if onboarding would be in scope. So let's say it's not in scope. We'll do, sync VR headset with app.
Mhm.
Um, just gonna give it a background. You would have something like browse hotspots, search hotspots. Um, and then if you can include things that are out of scope as well. You don't need to go into detail, but you want to show how they're all connected at a high level if you can.
Yeah.
So starts um, and and you can kind of break this out more granularly as well. And over here you would have an individual card. Um, I don't know, hotspot card. Um, list. So then you kind of like just end up drawing like arrows of like how they're connected and stuff. Oops.
Okay.
So pretty high level. You want to include some of the out of scope stuff if you can. If you can map like the whole thing in a reasonable way, just to kind of infer you have an understanding of hierarchy and how the pages are going to be related. Particularly, you want to highlight parent, child, and sibling relationships. Do you know what those are?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I want to do that for information architecture. Interaction design is, I would recommend that you choose like the core part of the experience to focus on, and mapping out the happy path and maybe some edge cases. So, for example, what we started doing was this part. So browse, search, view the results, and then start the experience, which we kind of have captured here. So we would map out the interaction flow of that. Um, and then you want to talk about some of the edge cases as well. And maybe you can, like, this isn't going to be like cookie cutter. So maybe you can talk about accessibility. Maybe you can talk about like, the browsing experience, etc. And then visual design and content hierarchy is basically the step here.
Mhm.
See how um, in this area, I started talking about, like what do we need to include on this page and what the hierarchy is. I didn't do a good job of like indenting it the right way to show the hierarchy, but ideally that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then this is like the content hierarchy of one card. You can have a discussion about like why it's designed that way. And the secret sauce is kind of like up to you, right? Like what are you good at? What's your kind of niche? What are your specialties?
Mm-hmm.
Like everything from step one to step four is like table stakes. Like all product designers need to know this. But if you want to be even more competitive, there's going to be a few select special skills that aren't like hard requirements, but you have. So you definitely want to demonstrate them here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
This is super high level. I wish I could go into more detail, but
No, it's it's
hour
okay.
went by so quickly.
It did. I no, I really appreciate this time, and I was gonna ask just because I don't have your talent. Do you have time frames for tomorrow or Monday?
Yeah, I do. Uh,
Okay, because
can I give you my Calendly link? How did you find my invite link? Was it through the group?
yeah, I'm in the group. So you posted, and I was just like, oh, it's like once I found out I was getting moved on to the next round, and I saw your like your calendarly.
Yeah.
Um.
Yeah, if you click in here, oh, I have spots for Monday.
Oh, okay. Um. Yeah, actually,
Yeah,
wait.
so I have a ton of slots on Monday that you can pick from.
Can you send me that link? Because I'm pressing the one on. Oh, sorry, wrong link. It was a mentorship, your group one. Okay, so I will schedule one for Monday because my interview is on Tuesday, and I'll do homework this weekend.
Yeah, sounds good.
And
Um,
what will be the best time for you? You're busy, busy, busy.
I think any time that I have free
There.
here, you can just look over.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so I can go a little bit over today. Like I know we didn't get to go through it in extreme detail. On Monday, what did you want to talk about? Did you want to keep doing whiteboarding and kind of like try it again? Or
I think I want to definitely have like that 30-minute, like do a whiteboard for 30 minutes.
one-to-one trial or like a mock, an actual like mock
A mock and yeah, like a mock interview, and then the rest of the 30 minutes can be like feedback. Um, and then this weekend I'll just start working on, I'll look at the video and start doing my homework and start practicing.
Cool. And definitely do give the other articles a read. You don't have to read everything, but I would highly recommend you read my interaction design article, which is on
Mm.
Medium. Do you want me to link that to you right now? Would that be better?
Oh, I have it saved on my phone.
Okay, cool, perfect.
You not purchased it. You wrote it around February, just
Uh,
recently.
yeah.
Mhm.
If you ever need a link, all of it's linked on my Instagram. I have a beacons.ai link that links out to all my accounts, and you'll see everything there.
Okay.
Yeah, I highly recommend that you read the interaction design one. And I wrote two on product thinking as well, and then
Mm-hmm.
three for career. I know they're all long reads, but hopefully, like they're not too dry. But I think they're all really relevant for you at this point.
Yes.
I would read those. I would practice this format. You have access to this Figma file, so you can go through this in more detail, and then just practice a couple times. We kind of did like a fusion between the abstract and the functional. You might want to
Mm-hmm.
practice separately. It's up to you. Um, and then, yeah, Monday we'll go through a mock and I'll give you feedback. Um, cool, that sounds good. And then just pausing the whole whiteboarding challenge thing for now. Do you have any questions for me, either related for whiteboarding or not related for whiteboarding? I can go a couple minutes over. I want to make sure that you have a chance to ask
Thank,
non-whiteboarding questions.
thank you. I appreciate it. I guess like just maybe some your like tips and advice on just interviewing, especially with these companies. Um, for me, it's just I get so nervous that I freeze, and I did it today. I was just like, Um,
Um, yeah, I think it's like whole imposter syndrome. It's like the fear of like, being judged. And I think like one thing that helps me is like, in design, there's no right answer. And you're always going to be better than the most senior designer at something just based off the unique context that you already have, right? So, um, when you kind of like, you have to be like bold, but also you have to be like open to feedback and like really like don't treat feedback as like getting it wrong. Like I think school really messes up with people because like it's that whole like relationship of like you study for a test and then once you pass or you fail or you get questions right or wrong and there's no redos. That's really not how it works. In any design process, any product development life cycle, even in the interview itself, you can always recover, right? So I don't know if this ever happened to you, but sometimes when I write exams and I don't, and I'm like lost on the first page, I go into this spiral and I get everything else wrong. Don't let that happen to your interviews. Like if you're a little bit nervous at the beginning, all interviewers will recognize that. They'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Don't let that set the tone for the rest of your interview, and you can always recover once you get more confident. And speaking of confidence, start with the things that you know for sure that you know is right, that you think you can really back up. And don't be afraid to ask questions and ask for help too, right? Like that's also fine. It doesn't really matter if you ask for help. It matters how well you can, even asking the right questions in the right way is actually a skill, right? Like
yeah.
even if you didn't know how to do this, but you asked me like really pinpoint targeted questions and you were able to like instantly learn and understand that, adjust and apply it into the whiteboarding challenge, even if your approach is completely wrong off base at the beginning, I would still pass you. And I think that goes the same for any interviewer. So
Mhm.
um, I don't know if that helps, but like don't stress about it too much.
Yeah, that's where I come from a project-based high school, so I didn't like I didn't grow up with standardized testing at all. So like now being doing interviews, and also this is my first time doing design interviews because I was actually I was heavy on research before
Mhm.
going back to design. I'm just like, oh my God. I think the imposter syndrome is just like,
Yeah. um, for me, like the 2 points in time when I overcame imposter syndrome was just like, shipping a product for the first time and seeing happy users use it and be like, wow, you solved my problem. And two is like mentoring somebody that knows less than you, which there definitely is people of. I always recommend like the best learning environment is to have a mentor that knows more than you, like a couple of peers are on the same level as you, but different like backgrounds and disciplines, and then a
mhm,
mentee that knows less than you. And having that kind of environment is the best way to grow. So,
okay.
after this interview, I definitely urge you to like have a mentee, have a mentor, have some peers that you work with, and get the full spectrum of kind of like different levels. It helps you really understand like where you're at, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And having that self awareness is literally a skill that's really critical for designers, and a lot of companies actually evaluate based off that. So
Mhm,
that's actually something that you want to look at too in the interview. Um, I talked about the hard skills already. I talked about the soft skills that they look at specifically in the whiteboarding challenge, but broadly, they look at proactivity and drive, like how ambitious you are. What do you do outside of the required work to further your skills and demonstrate interest and curiosity? They also really care about your self-awareness, right? Like, are you willing to ask for help? How do you take feedback? Do you know what you're good at? Do you know what you're not good at? Like, that's actually really key. And then yeah, communication is always the big one. But I think like aside from you being like a little bit nervous at the beginning, like I think you're actually quite good. So, speak more confidently and don't be afraid to just, involve them in the process, right? Again, like do
yeah.
not as like an exam proctor. That's like the easiest way to get yourself more nervous. Treat them as like a colleague or coworker that's like working together with you to solve this problem. And
Okay.
designing a time traveling interface is really, really, really hard, right? Like, oh, that's a big thing. I forgot to say, nobody expects you to come up with the right answer or even a good answer. It's literally just to see your thinking process. So
Yeah.
share it in the right way. If you find yourself stuck, what you want to do is verbally reiterate your process so far and then think about logically what else makes sense. Like, what questions do I need answers to, and what is the best way to get that answer or structure some way to distill down the next answer? Does that make sense?
Okay. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I actually will be I'm excited because I'll get to practice that tomorrow in the design-a-thon with Tile.
Nice.
Um, so at least I have some stuff to do over the weekend to help me prep.
Cool. Do you have any other questions? How are you
No,
feeling?
I'm feeling much better. I'm glad I took this time to speak to you. And you gave great feedback. I'm gonna go look at